Welcome to Grumpy Science. This is Bob Dennis and Mark Tommerdahl, and this will be our first question and answer period.
Yeah, we were very excited to get see that we had a whopping 140 views or something like that.
Yeah, when we checked for the first ones.
And we got questions, and so we're gonna try to answer one of the questions now, one or two of them. Anyway, one of the questions was that the focus score on the brain gauge does change with attention, and would using the brain gauge actually help someone with ADHD? Okay, so I will segue off into
but first you have to tell people why we're answering this particular question, because she appreciates our banter.
Yeah, that's true. we really appreciate somebody sending a question or
people
comment.
Are nice to us, get answers. People are nasty, probably not.
Yeah. And kudos to the grumpy old fart that wrote us as well, and we'll get to his comment later.
Yeah, he called himself style. He self-identified as a grumpy old fart, so this is nothing negative there. We're just identifying him so he knows we're talking about. We'll talk about his question in a minute. But
anyway, my own personal experience with kids with ADHD in particular, because I spent many years coaching swimming, and I spent many years as a martial arts instructor. Basically, I know a lot of people enroll their kids in martial arts training to help with their ADHD, or same thing with swimming. And they thought, oh, if they could just focus and work on this. And actually, physical activity did help. But a lot of that physical activity, particularly in martial arts, was about speed drills and focusing so that you could go faster. Using the brain gauge is really no different, especially for a reaction time drill. If you consider it a drill, you are practicing a task which forces you to go faster. Now, you think we're grumpy. You should hear the grumpy old fart scientist who, this is all practice effect. It doesn't mean anything. Well, if you saw our last video, you see that everybody's getting slower over the last 140 years.
They call it a training effect.
And
I think, right?
but things, it runs kind of counter to the whole idea that anything that you do, whether it be electrical stimulation or pulse electromagnetic fields or TMS or doing nootropics or something like that, would actually have any effect on your brain. Now, these same guys will say, well, of course, drinking alcohol has an effect on your scores.
Not mine, but
and there is no practice effect if you do a test and then drink alcohol and then do a test again and you get worse. There's not a practice effect, which we've shown time and again for alcohol, cough syrup, a number of drugs, distractions like video distractions, things like that can. But if you sit somebody down and do a study, then my scientific guess is that yes, it will help. Now, that being said,
I don't think it's possible to test performance without having some effect on performance, right? I mean, in a way,
not. It's like lifting weights.
It's like lifting weights.
We've said that before.
Big part of when I'm a professor, a big part of the way I teach people things is by putting things I want them to know on tests. And it's because I've got their attention, and they learn. Many people learn things from tests. Many people improve when they keep testing themselves and things. This is not true for all types of tests, but I think for brain gauge type stuff it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because you're pushing your ability to tell the difference between very fine things and to react and to discriminate in time and amplitude, space, and all kinds of things. So, in a way, it's like exercise, right? And it can be viewed that way.
Yeah. And so one reason I wanted to respond to this particular comment is because this would be a great thing to do as a crowdsourced science. And you've heard us mention crowdsourced science before, but what exactly is it? And then a lot of people say, oh, yeah, that just means we'd sign up and
product placement.
A lot of people would do the same study, and it would be online, and we'd recruit people by blogging about what would be the experiment, get people to sign up, do the experiment. And okay, so that all sounds real easy. And you think, well, that's not that big a deal. Well, let's compare that to what an NIH-funded experiment would be. And let's say we both work at the university and say, okay, let's do an ADHD study and see if kids with ADHD improve their focus with say, brain gauge testing. Well, first thing we got to do is we got to write up the study, which we would do for crowdsourced science. We would write up the general.
It helps to write down what you're going to do before you do it.
You write it up and you explain why.
you design it first. Right?
And also, it's got to be based on the literature. It's got to be completely based, not just on the literature, but if you're writing up the experiment, this is going to take you a couple of months to write up properly, and then you submit it. But you're submitting it now. Let's say the next cycle is June 5th. We would submit June 5th and submit that study, and then
to the National Institutes of Health,
right?
the NIH.
And then it would go to a study section, and that study section is made of a peer review group.
Grumpy old farts.
Yeah, a bunch of grumpy old guys who basically, generally, they probably are doing their own ADHD studies. My guess is most of these guys are doing MRI or EEG or something where they say, well, does some drug work better than another drug? Or they do some epidemiological study and say, well, do you get more ADHD kids in this part of the country or in that part of the country? And they might look at yours and go, I'm not really interested. Okay.
That's the bias in science and scientific review. You have that problem with papers and getting grants. If you're trying to do something new, you got to get it passed and approved by a bunch of people who are doing competing older things.
What we're saying is these guys are grumpier than we are, especially when they see new ideas.
Grumpy and sort of like, get off of my lawn, you young kids kind of way, right? Not in a funny beer drinking science sort of way.
No. But anyway, you'll apply to these guys, and so here's the timeline now. Okay, I'm already talking. Next cycle starts June 5th. So anyway, we would apply, and once we apply, then they would say, well, you got to have approval to even apply.
Yes.
And so we have to get approval from the university to do this. And the university would say, well, how many people are you going to have in your study? And we'll say, well, it depends on how much funding we get. And then we'll say, okay, we'll do this many people. And then they'll come back and say,
in their defense, the university's trying to defend people's safety, because in the past that was not always at the top of a scientist's priority list, right? So in the defense of the university, it started with, well, let's make sure the study is well thought out and safe. It's kind of gotten way
beyond that. It's more that there's a lot of people at universities that don't have enough work to do. So they sit on these boards and basically say, oh, you need to do power analysis of that. And I don't think your studies, what's your answer going to be? It's like, we don't know the answer. We haven't collected any data yet. So I've gone through this, and is this safe? Okay, this delivers
safe.
This delivers displacements, very small displacements, vibrations to the skin that are displaced between 200 and 400 microns. Very weak. I can't tell you how many times we've had to answer to the IRB where they say, we want to make sure this is safe. And it's really,
I think it's perfectly. I'm choking to death. I mean, seriously, what happens? Or drop it on my foot. Oh no! Oh, hit me in the head with it.
You in the head.
Is anything safe? The answer is no.
I've had a reviewer say,
"What a stupid person?
What if somebody tries to swallow this?" And I don't know how to answer that. So anyway,
and we've actually been asked. This is not a joke. What happens if somebody eats it?
Each question takes about a month to answer.
And
I mean, you answer it, and then you answer it right away, and then you have to wait for a month.
It takes them a month to think of the next one.
Then they come back and they say they could choke themselves, and comes back and they say they might try to eat it. And I'm just, by then I'm getting kind of like, we've done this hundreds of times because we work at a lot of different universities, a lot of people. But
it's true.
Anyway, so let's get through that. You got to get approval from the university and let's say the grumpy old farts have an epiphany, or NIH decides.
You're lucky. They don't show up for a meeting, and you kind of get through.
So we get this study. We get this study funded where we're gonna do a massive test of kids with ADHD and see if testing on the brain gauge actually improves their focus. And so let's say we get funded. Okay, and we apply June 5th. We'll get funding in February or March.
What's the funding line for typical NIH?
Right. We'll get funding in February or March.
Really small percentage.
Then the university will say, well, we need to rethink your approval. We approved you to get the study money, but now we want to think about it again, and we want to make sure. And so we might get reapproved. We'll have, in the meantime.
Now it's been a year.
Okay, so we had to apply for about $400,000 a year, let's say, for this study. And that money will go towards paying different people's salaries who will be involved in the study, and that means recruiting subjects and filling out forms. And basically all those people will be getting paid to do nothing and twiddle their thumbs until the administrators decide it's okay to start the study, which will be in March, April, or May. Or my worst case was 10 months on a 2-year grant. We won't go into that. But anyway,
this goes on. And I mean, I have waited years to get approval for very simple things. And it's gotten out of hand.
Okay.
I don't think it's actually.
So then we get the study. We get the study done. Then we start doing recruiting. And so it's set up so that we do, get this, 50 people a year. 50 subjects one subject per week, and you start, and you got to screen them. You got to make sure they have ADHD. That's fair enough. Okay, but then you got to bring them in. You got to do the study. You bring them, you do testing, and you say, well, okay, now here's the tricky part. We say, this would go better if we just sent a brain gauge home with each subject. Wow, there's a lot of red flags there, because the university does not really want you to do anything outside that. And actually, NIH is they're very focused on centralized research. They are getting better, like the stuff we're doing at the VA. They want people tested remotely, and they're really at the forefront of that, because a lot of the veterans don't want to travel 200 miles to the VA center.
You can't blame them for that, yeah.
But say we find 400 subjects in our unnamed state where we are, and we want to just send them brain gauges and test them, and then basically have them do these tests once a week, twice a week, which is 2 to 3 times a week is probably optimum for showing, minimally optimal for showing some kind of change. We're talking about 20 minutes a day of testing. And that would be the kind of study. But we would hit another roadblock when we say we really want to test these kids at home. So basically now you're seeing that we've spent a year and a half from this point now to actually starting to get some data. But these kids have to come in once a week. You have to hire people to sit with them, evaluate them, make sure they do the tests, send them home, and you got to pay them because, well, their parents, took time off work to drive them in. A lot of this
doesn't make the science any better. It's just paperwork.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of it's just red tape. And it doesn't make people safer. It doesn't make the science better. It just makes everything a lot slower and a lot more expensive.
So how would the crowdsourced science version of this go? Well, whoever has a brain gauge wants to participate in the study, and we make sure that everybody...
We make sure you understand it. We
make sure you
explain
understand
it to you what's involved, what the risks are, because we are actually interested in protecting your health and safety, even if it's stuff that we're not deciding for you. Maybe something.
So you're going to have to make sure nobody swallows this. This will be
or
on you.
Chokes themselves, because I can tell you, it'll cut your airway right off.
Yeah. So anyway, so the crowdsourced science
suppository.
The crowdsourced science view would go much quicker. Would cost the taxpayer $0, and we'd have the answer posted, in a few weeks. And
we could do hundreds of people or thousands of people in a relatively short period of time. They would all have to be adults who are able to, legally able to have like their own checking account or something like that. I mean, you have to be that capable and be able to make decisions about your own health. And those are the people that we'd be wanting to have involved. And then they could be involved, and we could do a study on it.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of different studies we could do. It's just, I just gave the ADHD stuff sort of got us on a segue, and then we got off topic a little bit. But basically, that's the way studies go, is that if you want to test somebody, you got to bring them in and test them and do all sorts of other paperwork and evaluation measures or whatever.
So we're getting away from that.
But basically what we want to do is a kind of study where we can blog about it or announce it on our website and or send it out to an email list of everyone that's interested and say,
protect your identity.
We want to see what's like. I think nootropics, like we talked about on the last video, nootropics would be a great thing to study. Or just say, do we have a lot of runners out there doing the test, or people wanting to start doing exercise?
A great study might be like which kinds of coffee are the best. I mean, people say coffee is a nootropic. It is. I think it's third on a list of top 10 or 20 as a nootropic. And okay, well, there's coffee and then there's coffee. I mean, what works?
And there's
best?
decaf. So we can do a study on
coffee,
that.
Right? Exactly.
So basically, that's the kind of thing we've done, and we just sort of give you a taste of why it takes so long to get things done. Our goal is to get things answered, and really, we want to answer questions that you guys are interested in.
Yeah, so please go down to the email, send us your questions. Also send us your suggestions for studies. We'll talk about them. It's going to take us a while to get this going because this is kind of a new thing. You normally don't have scientists on the internet saying, hey, all these people I've never met, let's do a study. We're going to try it.
We're in it for the long haul. We've been doing studies collectively for about 70 years.
I got nothing better to do with my day.
So as soon as we get our crowd for the crowdsource built up, we'll be doing crowdsourced science. So have a great day.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.